Good afternoon. Welcome to Data Center Strategic, Singapore 2009. I'm honored to have Dr. Heng from the Business Continuity Management Institute here today. Mr. Heng just recently spoke in one of our conference halls about business continuity and disaster recovery, planning for pandemic. Mr. Heng, I appreciate you being here. That's a very interesting topic that we're hearing more and more about today with the H1N1 virus. What are some of the things that you brought to the conference today, and what were some of the things that our delegates got to hear in your session?
Okay, once again, welcome for inviting me. What we did today is actually to give all IT professionals an insight on how they could manage the outbreak of the pandemic flu, H1N1. The basic thing is that even though, in fact, today the WHO World Health Organization has raised the level to level 6, which means we are now in full pandemic. Most organizations should actually approach from a very rational point of view, which is even though WHO has raised, we do not need to actually move according to their emergency level. Reason best is it depends on which country you're in. Example, we are now in Singapore. We will not need to actually be equipped to the level that's required by WHO as compared to if you were to be in Melbourne or in Tokyo or even in the US. Hence, what was discussed today was mainly to focus on them being an IT professional to have a sanity check when they are activating their disaster recovery plan or their business continuity plan.
You brought up two very good points. Number one, disaster recovery. Number two, being business continuity. A lot of times there's a gray area between the true definition of a disaster recovery versus a business continuity plan. How do you, when I as an IT professional come to you and say I need help with my business continuity plan, how do you explain the differences and what I should be looking for?
In fact, I actually had a chart up there showing what's business continuity plan and what's disaster recovery plan. Okay, definition of IT disaster recovery plan, or we call it disaster recovery plan, is is an organization's ability to continue its IT infrastructure, people and processes. Now, the business continuity plan will focus on your ability to continue your critical business function, people and process. Now, the major difference is that one focuses on the business, which is corporate-wide, enterprise-wide, while the other one focuses on IT. The general confusion is, should IT, DRP be part of business continuity or should it be independent? I guess theoretically it should be a subset, but I need to warn everybody that generally the CIO or the IT people will not be reporting in to the business continuity plan because it is a different organization within the setup itself. Hence, it's very important to note that the disaster recovery plan should be closely integrated with the business continuity plan on one condition: your data center and your main operating business unit are co-located in one location. Hence, you fall back to first definition, deny access to people, process, infrastructure, of which if your data center is there, you will also activate your disaster recovery plan in conjunction with business continuity plan. The other scenario is that when you have your data center is outside of your main critical business function, the most probable definition will be either one will go down at one time. And hence, if the business goes down, the data center is still running. Hence, you don't need to activate your data center, except the rerouting of your data lines to the alternate site. If the data center goes down, which means your main business unit is still available, what do? You activate your disaster recovery plan. Hence, that's the major confusion among the IT professionals and the business continuity people.
And given that there is some confusion, do you see or do you hear often from clients, I've got a great business continuity plan. We have it on a shelf in our CIO's office, and that's where it stays until we need it. How do you get the mindset built into a customer that now that you have the plan, you have to exercise it regularly and update it?
Okay, that's the biggest challenge we're facing, and hence as part of the institute, one of the things we have been trying to, in fact, we are beginning to educate people as far as the GCC or the Middle East itself to Australia Pacific. The common problem we have is first, what's disaster recovery, what is business continuity? Next question is, I have a plan, I think, is that sufficient? Again, your question actually begs a very fundamental requirement. I think, does it work? I think this is more important than do you have a plan? Hence, the principle behind all business continuity is actually, or disaster recovery, is actually to have a tested plan.
Right.
The principle should be, if a plan is tested and has some problems, it's better than a plan well written and not tested. So that's basically a moral behind the whole story.
So that, I would assume that's the general guideline that you try to get across to your customers, is that it's okay to have a problem in your plan. That's where you want to find it, is when you're exercising it versus when it's a true situation.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, most of the disaster that we have encountered, actual disaster, the guys who actually survive, surprisingly, are people with lousy plans, but tested. Reason is because at least I know what works and what doesn't, and I will focus on those things that doesn't work.
Right.
I'll take extra care to make sure that it works this time during a live disaster. So that is one of the most important learning experience from a typical disaster of people who have tested their plan.
So do you think you got a lot of IT professionals in your conference that had an aha moment and went, oh, that may be something we should look at, or were most of them already sound in the fact that they have a well-developed plan?
During the break, a couple of guys came to me, and one of the interesting things that they say was, we have a plan, all right? So we do test it off and on. But what they mentioned about as part of my presentation was the fact that a pandemic flu outbreak is different from a typical IT disaster, because your infrastructure is in place, except you can enter, or your IT staff is being quarantined. So I guess the key message that they have learned is that this is a different kind of disaster. It's a disaster, but it's a different kind of disaster which requires it's not about sequential recovery, but rather a well thought through set of procedure prior to disaster, and you hope to have it run as close as possible when the outbreak occurs.
Right, true, because with a pandemic you may have all of the keys in place, but you have nobody to turn those keys.
That's right, yeah.
Well, I think it's a great topic, and I'm certainly glad that you folks came today and presented it. We don't see a lot of that, or a lot of focus on a pandemic outbreak. I appreciate all the time and the effort you gave us today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a super afternoon.
Thank you.